These 5 books, I guarantee, will change everything that you believe. Guarantee might be too strong a word. Yes, I am raw dogging a kilo of Greek-style natural yogurt because it goes out today. And it was during this moment in my lunch break that I realised that I'm starting to question everything I know about myself. I didn't think I was capable of eating like nearly a tub, but yeah, you know, boys dedicated. Just to set the tone, we're not going to be talking about Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, Nietzsche. There's going to be no philosophers. And despite me being, as much as I try, a good Muslim boy, we're not going to talk about any religious texts. We're just setting the stage. The reason for that is that there's like 1,001 videos where people talk about that, and I'm not like others. That's why I'm eating a kilo of yogurt. Who wants to watch a video where the same stuff is being regurgitated over and over again? Not me. Let's get into them. Normally, with these videos, you get a dystopian. Like, one is going to crop up in some way, shape, or form. And when it comes to people who don't read as vast as they portray, they normally fall into 2 categories. You get the Brave New World people versus the 1984, but no one remembers the granddaddy. No one remembers the book that made these 2 appear. The book that influenced both. That is We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. I've spoken about We a number of times, but I really think people are sleeping on one of Russia's greatest works. At the heart of this novel, it is about a society that is run on pure logic and facts. Like, everything runs as smoothly as possible as logic dictates. And because facts and logic dictate everything, you can remove every ounce of individualism from everyone. So the people under the one state within We are just reduced to numbers and letters. They are purely cogs in the machine. But our protagonist is going to start feeling some emotions. He's going to want to do what he wants to do. There's an element of free will here that he wants. But is society going to allow him to do that? For me, We stands above 1984 and Brave New World because it questions the meaning of happiness and also probes into the problems that arise between conformity and uniformity. Book 1. Book 2 needs no introduction. It is The Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. I've done a full video on the Satanic Verses. If this is the first time you've come across me, let me just state some things at you. I read and studied this book before I myself became Muslim. Rushdie is my favourite author. I did my undergraduate on him, my master's on him. I have spent a lot of time reading and rereading this book, and in fact it's the first copy I ever bought. I've never bought a second copy. This one will do me. The Satanic Verses is a complicated book, and at the crux of it, it is how religion informs people's identity, and thus how does that inform their lives, and what happens if that religion was to change halfway through. And we'll see this with Spoono and Gabriel. I would argue that the majority of you don't know the entirety of this novel. You know a small slither, and that is the depiction of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Satanic Verses, it doesn't matter how you feel about this book, if you've read it or if you haven't, just the mere mention of the book alone, even just skimming the Wikipedia of this, you're going to be grappling with your belief on expression, on freedom, on speech, but ultimately the power of narrative. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to talk about this one first.
This is a cool edition of a book.
This is the Nasir trilogy by Agustin Fernandez Mayo. It is 3 books in one, this. It's the Nasir, Dream, Lab, and Experience. You could buy them individually. So you could pick up one and you'll get the rough idea of what I'm getting at, or you could buy the trilogy. It's the same price for one book as it is for the entire 3. I actually asked another person, Ben, I'll link their video down below.
The traditional sized UK book, whereas this is like a mass market paperback size, and I fucking love it.
I asked Ben to read this because I wanted him to read something that would really challenge him. And in fact, in the Nasir trilogy, even though I absolutely adore it and put it on my top 100 books of the 21st century, this book ultimately will question what you think a book should be, what it should do, and what it should achieve. All the rules have been scrapped in the making of the Nasir trilogy. The only way I can describe it is, and it's a book that a lot of people, if they haven't read it, they know. It's House of Leaves. People talk about Danielewski's House of Leaves as this book that really just like throws into the face of its reader that it can do whatever it wants. House of Leaves is nothing compared to this. It is fragmented. It is hyper connected. It is the greatest example that I can give of the internet novel. Our fractured minds, our reluctancy to focus on a task, this enjoyment towards the short form, towards the vignette, towards the fragment, these interspersing stories and narratives that just like spool out on our phone as we watch TV, as we're talking, as we're texting. This book seems to encapsulate that in its entirety, to the point that it is mind-bending. It is audacious, if not blatant, within its experimentation. The more you get into it, the more that it becomes fully aware of what it is doing. Yes, we have a little graphic novel.
Fascinated me, it confused me, it made me want to read a lot of different things.
Horrendously frustrating at times, but this book is looking you in the face, trying to explain the contemporary experience that we are dealing with. A more and more fractured world that feels it gives the facade of hyperconnectivity based on how limited we are willing to spend time to see where the dots are going. Very good book.
This is fucking awesome.
But it is not as good as Jeanette Winterson's Written on the Body, which I think is a perfect novel. I love everything about this book. I will not take any criticism, only compliments towards Jeanette Winterson's Written on the Body, which is a shame because anything else that Jeanette Winterson has written is rubbish. This book primarily is about love and understanding. Our main protagonist can change sex and gender at whim and is having relationships with normal people. That's the best way that I can describe this. However, while some people hear sex, gender, love and identity and start screaming, oh no, I promise you, this book was written in the 1990s, the early 1990s. And while I'm not saying that the conversation wasn't happening during that time, it was not as infiltrated into our culture as it is now. It wasn't a talking point that like your nan is mentioning. It wasn't a conversation brought up all the time on TV. It wasn't like the wedge issue that it currently is now. And that's why I really appreciate this book, because it is talking about a cultural moment that we are all navigating at the moment. It doesn't really matter if you're for or against it. That's not really what I'm here to discuss right now. But because this was written within the 90s, it is contemporary, it is modern enough that it isn't completely alienating. It is based enough within cliche and trope that this is readable and it is something that you can follow, all while challenging the notions of what sex and gender is and how it relates to identity. Equally, the heartbreaking end of this does it really focuses on how well can you truly know and understand another person. And when we have this protagonist that seems to, again, flaunt all rules of gender conformity, of social conformity, can that person feel love? Can that person have love given to them? It is a book that I will completely rave about probably until my dying days, unless something comes out and knocks this out of the park. But I do want to emphasise that because this book was written within the 90s, it doesn't have any pessimism or pandering towards the current culture wars, where books that are recently published seem to do one of two things. They're either against it or for it. Because this is a backlist book, it doesn't have to do any of that, because the culture war wasn't going on within the 1990s, or if it was, it wasn't as prevalent as it is today in the 2020s. And while I finish off this kilo of yogurt, we can knock off the last book, Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall. This is a tour de force. This is one of the greatest books of the 21st century. It is a book that redefined historical fiction. Everyone is trying to replicate what Hilary Mantel is doing in the contemporary. But this book, when it came out in the late noughties, I mean, it is phenomenal. It is difficult. Hilary Mantel just assumes that you need to know what is currently going on. And you are thrown into the court of Henry VIII. And you are seeing events unfold as Henry VIII's right-hand man, Thomas Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell traditionally has been vilified by historians, but Hilary Mantel is a revisionist here. She's trying to make Thomas Cromwell human. We're trying to see and understand why Thomas Cromwell did, advised, and actioned certain things. And from someone who has read the entire of the Wolf Hall trilogy, she succeeds. She succeeds. You understand what Thomas Cromwell is doing and why he is doing it, as it happens in real time. What I think Wolf Hall brings to readers is that it does allow you to question the reliability of historical account and document. There are many times within our lives that we are going to be confronted with stories, we are going to hear about individuals that we're going to have negative connotations towards. But what Wolf Hall asks us to do is to see the reasoning to why people do such acts. And while cruel and unkind they may be, Hilary Mantel puts forward that Thomas Cromwell is doing these things for quite sensible, logical reasons. It's to see the person for who they are, despite the connotations and preconceptions that we have of those individuals. So those are my 5 books. Tell me in the comments how these are awful and that the 5 that you were going to suggest were way better. I'm going to sit down and die in a yogurt coma. Bye!